Welcome to Enlightenment of Change on webtalkradio.com. I'm your host, Connie Whitman. I hope you know that I love that you join me every week. Now, as you listen to the show, listen, I know we hear that word change, whether we choose it or it's thrust upon us, it gives you that knot in the stomach, right? How am I going to do this? What do I do? And I hope that between my guests and I, that you take our ideas, strategies, tips, and just implement something small. And I promise you magic will happen on the back end. So of course, to help you on your journey of change, I have a free gift for you. It's my communication style assessment. The link is in the show notes. You get 2 reports. One will spotlight your natural communication superpowers, how people are receiving your message. Kind of important to know. Flip side, you'll receive a secondary report, which is your lowest score. Typically, that could be a blind spot. So you don't know how your message is being received by someone who speaks or communicates 100% or 180 degrees different than you. So again, that's my gift to you. It's in the show notes. I hope it helps you navigate change in your life and whatever that means to you. Now, my motivational quote today is by the amazing Albert Einstein, and he says, "The world as we have created it is a process of our thinking. It cannot be changed without changing our thinking." Now, weekly, as I find these quotes and I reflect on my personal life and my business, I've really learned that all progress, all capitalized progress, requires change. And that's one of the reasons I started recording the show over a decade ago. I know that I've needed help with changing my behaviors, right? Whatever that's been through the years to support my ongoing success, both as a business owner and also to support my colleagues. And here's the deal. We can't do it alone anymore. There's just too much going on and change is happening too fast in the world. So if you've ever felt stuck, uncertain, frustrated with problems, your own poor performance or that of your team, or challenging opportunities, trust that you can create a clear path forward, accelerate your progress, and achieve your goals while helping others do the same. So I'm excited to share this week's guest. His name is Tim Rhode, and straight out of his book, Changing Lanes for Business, Tim and I are going to dig in and discuss his simple, proven 4-step approach to lead successful change with confidence for the rest of your career. Now, Tim is a successful business consultant, author, speaker, leadership coach with more than 35 years of entrepreneurial experience. Now, he's launched and led multiple 7- and 8-figures high service-based businesses, helping thousands of customers and hundreds of teams to transform their lives personally and professionally with positive change. Now, coaching leaders and teams in dozens of industry to overcome challenges and get from where they are now to where they want to be is what he's all about. So please help me welcome Tim to the show. So Tim, thanks for being on.
Thank you, Connie. That was a great introduction.
Hey, dude, man, you got some, and I was giggling, 35 years, right on 40 years. Listen, brother, we do not look it. So if you're listening on Apple, I highly recommend going to YouTube. We are good looking people.
Yep, I agree with you there.
Yeah, you're so funny. He's bright red now. Okay. So here's my first question, Tim, being serious. I really am excited about this conversation because change, it's hard, man. It's hard, right? It is what it is. Now, you said that all progress requires change. Can you explain that? And I think that'll set the stage for our conversation today.
Well, it is true. As I took a look back at my career and all the changes that I've navigated in my life, it dawned on me that was sort of the universal truth. No matter if you want to keep getting what you're getting, keep doing what you're doing, right? So anytime you want to make change, if you're trying to overcome a problem or seize an opportunity or just make something better in general, it's going to require something to change. So if all progress requires change and it's what it's going to take to get from where you are to where you want to be, why not be good at it
and make it easier
and make it easier
on yourself? And here's the thing, people like you, people like me, whoever, right, that people hire to help them navigate that change, because we have blind spots. So we're changing something because maybe a light was shown on that particular blind spot. And we think, oh, I need that for my family, or I need that for my career. I need that for my business, fill in the blank. That's why my quote I thought was so important. And my intro, we just can't do it alone anymore. So here's the good news, right? Shows like this, the internet, we can always find a resource to help us navigate whatever that next change is. So your zone of genius, and I know you have a gift at the end, which we'll talk about later, but your zone of genius, I think, will really help people understand what that fourth step is and why it can be. I think when people hear the word change or change is thrust upon us, Tim, our first instinct is, how am I going to do this? I can't do this. I don't know what to do. And I think that four-step approach, people are going to go, oh, really? And that's what we're going to talk about today. So I think it's important.
Absolutely.
Why do people believe that change is hard? Like through, thousands of people that you've coached and spoken with, why do they think it's hard?
Well, in general, change, it sort of generates a recoil reaction. People anticipate uh, struggle, difficulty, uncertainty, right? All of these things that they don't necessarily express, but when you start talking with people about change, it's kind of like giving a cat a bath. You get this instant reluctance, whether it's visible or not. People start wondering how this is going to affect them, and typically their experience with change has been difficulty. Something that gets harder, something gets easier, something gets more elusive, right? And so there's this natural resistance to change. And the good news is it doesn't have to be that way. And one of the reasons that I called the book and the coaching program, this whole approach, Changing Lanes for Business, is to simplify it. So people will do what they do well. And when they don't know, they don't necessarily have an approach that they can rely on to navigate change, they're going to tend to resist it. They're going to tend to be apprehensive and try to keep it away, right? But if they have a simple approach that they know works all the time, then they'll do it. They'll use it. So as I've looked at change over the years, and most people think that change is hard, and so they resist it. So if we could make it simpler, which is what I've spent most of my career doing, trying to simplify things instead of complicate them, it dawned on me that leading change in business and life, for that matter, isn't a lot different than changing lanes in your car. And while people resist change, no one changes lanes to do worse, right? When you're driving, do you change lanes to do worse?
Oh, I want to go faster.
You only change lanes to do better, right? Whether you're going faster or whether you're making your way off to your exit ramp, you only change lanes to do better. So the whole, what part of the secret sauce behind this approach is that the hidden message is that change is going to make things better, right? And when you tie it to something they already know how to do, so the reluctance starts to go away.
It's interesting because when COVID hit and I wrote my book, it's my 7 steps. And it's just funny, when I started my business 22 years ago, I knew I was good at sales and I was good at teaching sales because my region was always number one, right? I'm competitive, but I understood you have to change behavior to create change that sticks, right? That we could actually multiply and stick. So I knew I had a system, but it was funny because when I started my business, I'm like, okay, now what am I going to teach? And I really reflected and thought, well, what is my process? If I could keep it simple, exactly what you just said, keep it simple, have it duplicatable, right? Rinse and repeat, create this process and have people understand that it's easier than you think and make it very digestible. People will change with ease. In my case, right? The topic is always sales. And the other thing you just said that I kind of snickered to myself, people want to stay comfortable. So for example, right, most of my clients are banks, credit unions, bigger organizations. The individuals that are in operations are oftentimes thrown to manage a sales team. Well, they don't know the first thing about sales. So what do they focus on? All the operational stuff, but that's not going to grow the business. So as soon as you start teaching them a process, because operation people like processes, they're like, oh, that's what you want me to tell them to do or to monitor? It becomes easy. We are the GPS. That's really what we're saying. So I love your analogy with the road because we become the GPS. And the other thing you said that is very important, I hope everybody heard, we have to keep it simple. I think there's so many systems out there that I look at them and I think, who can duplicate this? Whoever created it, I guess they think it makes them look smart. And I believe that if I could keep things super simple and duplicatable, smidges, little steps at a time, people can then change their GPS, like you said, changing the lane to find the right exit, but stay in the lane that they need to be in. It's a strategy, but we have to keep it simple. So they're just a couple of things that you said that I really, really like.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, so much of this approach is based on human nature and
Yeah.
going with human nature instead of against it. And so people will do what they do well. So if you can help them do this well, they won't resist change. In fact, the whole point of this thing, it gets people to the point where they actually go looking for change. They can't wait to change. When you're stuck in traffic, you don't look forward to sitting there, staying stuck. You want to get the heck out of there and get over where things are going, and the going is better, right?
Yeah.
So when you can do that yourself as a business leader, or you can, better yet, you can get your team into that mindset. Now there's nothing stopping you.
It's so interesting when we allow people to have, and I call them mini successes, right? Because you can't make giant steps forward. You'll fail because it doesn't become a habit. So, James Clear's book, I've had him on my show. I love him. I've read that book. It's like a Bible for me because it's the atomic habit, right? Those little micro steps, kind of like what we're talking about right here. But if we can build on people's strengths, make those little mini changes, mini successes, it's exactly right. People I coach or businesses I coach, they come back saying, that's so easy. What's the next thing? What are we going to do next? Yeah. They're eager to create the change. They're buying in and they become curious about the change. But we got to give them the mini successes. Otherwise, humans, we think this is too hard. I'm not going to do it. We fail before we even begin.
One of the big revelations that strike people when they're going through this coaching program, or they're going through the steps to successful change, is they realize, with the questions that I ask them, that the 4 steps are this. It's just like when you're changing lanes with your car. You decide to change, you look for options and risks. What's the best way? Is it clear? Is it not? Right? You signal, which you should signal, right? Unless you're driving in Jersey, then you might not, but you signal, and then you make the change. You don't go halfway, or you don't sit there with your turn signal on and not change, although some people do. So it's decide, look, signal, and change, right? So when people are going through these 4 steps, they are often liberated, just realizing that they don't have, like, they resisted change because it seems like this big thing, like the board or the CEO or the marketing department or somebody wants this massive change, and they're reluctant because they can't see how to get from whatever lane they're in all the way over to the fast lane. When they realize what some of the questions say, well, what do you have to do just to make progress, like just get in the next lane? You can just see the lights come on, and people realize that they could change one lane, accelerate, do better, and then from there they can either stay in that lane and achieve their goal, or from there they can get to the next lane and the next lane. Now, sometimes it's more drastic. Sometimes they have to make more radical change. But even then, when we change lanes in our car, sometimes we swoop across 2 or 3 lanes, right? But what you just talked about, making the small changes, like let's just do better than we are right now. Let's get around these obstacles and start making progress. And from there, we'll see how and when we can make the next lane. And that, I've seen that unstick so many business leaders who were just they were oversizing the problem or the challenge, and now they see how they can get from here to the next lane.
Yeah. And that's the thing too, by changing that one lane, it gives you a whole different perspective of the road ahead. So sometimes people are so afraid of even taking that first step, but that first step could really be an eye-opening experience where the optics, the vision, the perspective changes, that you think, oh, like, why didn't I do this sooner? Because it becomes really obvious. But if you didn't turn that corner or change that lane, it's not always as visible or as obvious, right? So sometimes we have to have movement forward in order to change lanes, even if it's a left to right, right?
Yeah. And, kind of getting back to your original question, why do people resist change? I mean, change is scary. There's a lot going on in driving. It's one of the most dangerous things that you can do. I've got 2 adult sons, and I taught them both how to drive. And when they got on the busy roads, the busy highways around here, changing lanes was freaking people out. It was just, there's so many things going on. There's cars in front of you with brake lights. There's cars behind you. There's trucks alongside. There's zooming past. Some people are flying. Some people are slamming on their brakes. You got to have your eyes all around you and look, right? And when you're first doing that, it's so mechanical, it's almost overwhelming. Mm-hmm. But by the time they've been driving for 6 months or a year or 2 years, you don't even think about it. You know, you've done it, you've got it down, you've got this approach, you kind of know where you look forward, you look back, you look alongside, and then off you go. And it's the same thing in business, it's the same thing in life. When you have a reliable approach to make change, you do it effortlessly. You actually look forward. Now when they drive, they can't wait to change lanes.
Yeah.
Or when they were getting started, it was like, oh, like there was almost a panic attack.
Yeah.
So I see that too with people in business, and where they've been resisting change. Once they have an approach and they show them, when they go through this program, they actually work on something. They're changing something. They're not just learning how, they're actually changing something. And when that thing starts to move, you can just see the smiles start and people start to go.
It's so interesting. I remember during COVID, after I published my book, I became friends with the publisher. It's just how I roll. I become friends with people I work with, And anyway, so she was doing a collaborative book, and she said to me, it was called Bright Spots. And she said, change is here. It's thrust upon the whole world, and people need inspiration and some grounding of how do I navigate this uncertainty, right? We're in the snow globe turned upside down. And so I said to her, I don't know. And I do the show, right? Change, Enlightenment of Change, in my other show, my sales show, Changing the Sales Game. And I said, well, I don't know what I do when changes. I just do it. And she said, well, you have to have a process. I go, oh, maybe. So anyway, I said, I'll be part of the book. I don't know if I have anything good to say, right? How the negative record player, I wanted to comment on that. We all have it.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, yeah, we all have it loud and clear. But anyway, I met with the writing coach who I had met during my book. And I said, Kay, I think I have a process, but just let's just talk. I said, okay. So we're talking through. She asked me questions, because sometimes something is so ingrained in us that you don't see it as a process. It's just how we live, right? So there's a point to this point to the story. So at the end of it, she said, you have a 5-step approach to when change is thrust upon you, what you do. I go, I do? So we went, I go, oh yeah, I do that. Oh yeah, yeah. And so that was my chapter, but we giggled. And I said, isn't that funny? Because it's how I've lived my life, how I've created and embraced change through my life. I'm not fearful of it, right? I courageously embrace it because I have a process. I didn't even know that. And that's what your book is. That's what you're talking about. And that's what the gift is all about at the end. So here's your GPS is here during the show. Tim's got it for you, right?
Well, you're right on point with this, and there's actually 4 or 5 main reasons why. So I don't know if you saw the statistics and the information I sent, but was like 70+% of change efforts in business struggle or fail.
I know
70%, right? And there's several main reasons for that. And they kind of coincide with the 4 steps, right? Business leaders they simply don't decide to change. They're confused, they're uncertain, they don't know that they have the resources, they hesitate, and so they just don't change. They might not even consciously decide not to. They just don't decide, right? There's a difference, right?
Or still a decision, but yes.
Right. Or when they decide to change, they don't look around. They've got blind spots all over the place, and they either change and make things worse, or they change partially and it doesn't get done, and that change struggles and they get reluctance and things recoil. And right, that's another reason. They might change and they might have a good look, but they do a lousy job of communicating. They don't signal at all. Or, we all know business leaders like that. That's where half of my business comes from, working with companies that have business leaders that are doing things without getting their team on board. So they don't signal to their other stakeholders or their team or whatever the case might be. They signal poorly, or they get all the way to that and they're signaling, and then they don't actually follow through on the change. They either get halfway into it and start chasing some other shiny object, or for whatever reason, they run into unexpected resistance. They didn't anticipate it. The book has the process, the approach, the coaching program, all have how to resolve each of those things. And it's really, really simple. But the biggest one of all, and you just touched on it, is that business leaders simply don't have a reliable way to lead successful change. They've got systems for generating leads. They've got systems for tracking their SEO. They've got systems for booking their people or their customers. They got systems for tracking their income, their expense, for reporting their taxes, for paying their utility bills. They got systems for everything, right? But when you ask a business leader, well, what's your approach for leading successful change? You get this blank stare and this empty thought bubble, and it just hasn't occurred to them. Yet all progress requires change. So if everything that they want to do to make progress leans on change and they don't have a reliable approach, like what are the odds? That the biggest reason for the challenge is that we just wing it. We rely, as business leaders, we rely on our experience and our instincts.
Yeah.
Which aren't bad, right? That's what got us here. So, but the reason that the results are so poor, 70%, is that we've got these blind spots. Our results and our experience alone have proven that they're not enough to generate successful change. So once you've got like your 5 steps, you can do that over and over again, just like you can produce payroll every 2 weeks, or you can publish your podcast or whatever. You got systems for all that stuff. So this is just a simple 4-step approach that works every time.
And it's funny. I have a new client up in New Hampshire, and I was doing one of the courses that I teach, and I said to him, whatever question they asked during the program, and I said, to this one young man, and I said, I have a question for you. If we can take whatever his thought was for his team, he's one of the leaders, and I said, and we can create a system that you can see where the breakdown is in whatever their performance is, in this case, sales, right? Or networking, whatever, business development. And you see where their strengths are and where they're firing full throttle, right? We don't have to address that. And I said, if we can systematize what we're talking about, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. And he looked at me and he said, systematize what we're doing. And just that word systematize, because we know payroll and all the things you say that we know, we need a system, but we need a system to change, and a system that we know is going to work every time. And that's what your changing lanes is about. So I love it. I think this is great. The other thing, Tim, I want to say, as we're talking, first of all, I love your vibe and how you articulate, but also it's real life stuff. I'm a faculty member for an organization. They're called Financial Leaders Institute, right? My world is banks and credit unions. And so we have thought leaders, younger thought leaders, who now are coming through that leadership game. And it's a curriculum of about 9 months. My class is change management. And I always have them listen to a podcast. This is going to be the podcast they listen to this year.
Great.
Yeah. Because I think if we can simplify, and shine a light on those potential blind spots, but make it, once the light is shown, again, they go, oh, I know exactly what to do. It doesn't become an issue or angst anymore. It becomes, oh, this is my next step. So I'm loving this 4-step approach. Simple works.
Well, a couple things. There are some good change management methodologies out there.
Oh, yeah.
Kotter's change has been the industry, like that's been the bulwark, the cornerstone of it for years. There's ADKAR and all these other approaches to it. But what I found is that as much as you can justify every step of their process, there's so much. Like it takes, if you're a business leader and you're trying to implement those change management models, you better have months or even years and be able to put somebody on them and study them and then train your whole organization on them over and over. Like it almost takes a separate, you almost have to divorce yourself from what you're doing and go focus on becoming this change management expert. What if instead, and this was the whole driving force behind this, what if instead we could have an approach to lead successful change that you already knew how to do? You do it 20 times on the way to work every day, and on the way home again, and on the way to the grocery store. And now we apply that, which is a skills transfer, a knowledge transfer to what I'm doing in business. There's a few simple questions for each step. And when you answer these questions, you ask and answer these questions, it's just lights on. And now you don't have to go take a course, a college course or a semester or whatever, get a degree in change management to help inspire your people to get on the program or to take the company where you want it to go. So it's just, I'm trying to give people a very simple approach that they already know how to do.
And you know why I think this is important too, from a human component, Tim? If you can help me learn change, yes, it's going to impact my career, business, me as a leader with my team, right? So that all of a sudden the company's saying, hey, what are they doing over there? Connie Whitman's team, they're rock stars. How can we duplicate what she's doing? So you have that ripple effect internally from a professional perspective. but we're human, and our personal and professional, we're the same person. So if we can get these 4 steps so ingrained in how we think about change, no matter what that is, again, like I started the show, now I'm using it in my life. I'm using it with my kids, and I'm teaching them without even thinking about it, because the system is logical and obvious. I can duplicate it in every aspect of my life. I think it helps, especially young leaders, right, that are starting out. You can use this in all aspects of your life so that we create more ease instead of this boulder up the hill, right?
Yeah, a great analogy, because that's exactly what it is. And you're worried that it's going to roll back over the top of you.
Yeah.
So, when you can look at people and say, look, change doesn't have to be hard. You already know how to do this. And they look at you like incredulously, but then when you show them, it really is that easy. And people will do what they do well. If they've got an easy way to succeed with something, they will do it over and over again. You open the show by talking about, the types of change. There's a change that's put upon you, and there's a changes that you take on. And I actually address this in the program. I actually think there's 3 main types of change.
Oh,
First one you described, there's the changes that are put upon you. There's the, pandemics, economic swings, weather, events, you name it, that government regulations that you can't do anything about, right? Those you just have to deal with, and you have to be able to adapt to them, right? Then there's the changes that we take on. We decide to expand or to open another location, or we decide to hire that person or fire that person, or change. We're going to refresh our brand, or start another podcast, right? We're going to write a book. Those are the changes that we take on. We have to deal with those changes, right? We're going to lose weight or whatever, right? But there's a third type of change, and that's the changes that we have to deal with because of something that we did or didn't do. So if we hired the wrong person, or we waited too late to prepare our taxes, or we didn't train our team well enough to make our sales goal, or we didn't spend enough money on advertising, so those are changes that we have to deal with. They're sort of somewhere in between there. We have to deal with this stuff because we bit off more than we could chew, or we didn't prepare properly, right? As opposed to something we just decided to do. And so in any event, in any of those events, having a reliable approach to get from where we are right now, which is where we want to be, is like it's just like having a magic wand, like that you can get from here where you are to where you want to be. That's what I'm trying to help business leaders with, is to find a simple way to navigate that, and they don't have to worry. They don't have to miss any of the essential steps.
It's interesting. I just taught a class this morning to one of my clients. We did it virtually. It was business development. And so I have my 7-step approach. So I always try whatever, when we dig in a little deeper to more advanced skills, right? Like business development's a little more advanced than the basic sales process. But I always put it into the framework of my process so people understand where their own deficits are from coaching, self-development, whatever it is. Business development, 80% of doing really a good job with developing new business is all in the preparation.
Mhm.
So yeah. And when I broke it out, like, it's a 2-day session, 2-3 hours of teaching. And today we didn't even get through all of preparation. And I said, there's more to come in preparation too. So how important is preparation? So
Yeah,
we forget that, we put the cart before the horse so many times. We got to stop it. What do we need to do to show up and build on the strengths that we have? But I love that. And can I steal it so that I'm going to say there's 2
absolutely.
types of change. One we choose,
Please.
one thrust upon us, and the one that we kind of need to mitigate, right?
Yeah, the stuff that the changes that are there because of something we did or didn't do well,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. That we could do better or learn from.
We
Last,
launched a business back in 1996, and it was a brand new business model, and it did fairly well, and we made a change to it, and then it just took off. And I spent the next 4 or 5 years, trying to keep up with the explosive growth of this business, because the changes that we did were working, right? So those were changes that I had to deal with, because our team had to deal with, because of decisions that we made, right? They weren't thrust upon us, and we didn't see them coming. They were an effect of what we did or didn't do.
a good problem to have, but you better solve that problem.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Last question, because we're out of time, but resistance, because I think sometimes we have that inner resistance. What can business leaders do to reduce and overcome that just that natural instinct of, oh, I just can't. I don't have the bandwidth. I don't have the energy, whatever it might be.
Yeah, and it comes back to the same thing. There are some really simple ways. If once a business leader realizes what the source of the resistance is, they can reduce it or eliminate it. In fact, I've addressed this I have a special piece that I call the Business Leader's Guide to Reduce or Eliminate Resistance to Change. And this has come up with every person that's been through the program, the Changing Lanes program, has talked about resistance. And so I said, let's come up with here's a piece that you can use, and this is a way to navigate resistance, however you're running into it. And so this handout covers, it's actually like a 12-page PDF that covers all 5 of the primary approaches to reduce or eliminate resistance to change. And so I'd be happy to share that with your readers if you'd like. I mean,
I'd love that.
They're simple. Once you see them, they're simple. Like people support. So that, remember I said human nature, right, is the key to this whole thing. People support what they help to create. So the very first key to reduce or eliminate resistance to change is to get your people involved. Now, they don't have to be involved in the whole thing, but maybe a part of it. Or I would like to get things, kind of 80% of the way there, and then bring my team in and say, hey, I want to do this with the business. What do you think is the best way for us to do this? Or who else should we have involved? And and this is important, I make a big deal out of this in the coaching program, is what can you do to help make sure this succeeds? Well, I'm not asking them whether we should do it or not. I'm asking them what they can do to help make sure it succeeds, right? So it's like pick something from what's behind door number 1, right? And then they come up with that, and now they're in the process. They're far less likely, if at all, to resist the change. That's just one of them. There are 5 different pearls in this piece that it's like a worksheet, so you can literally fill it out as you're going through it and decode whatever challenge you're facing.
I love it. And I have one last quick story. A friend of mine, he's the CEO of Hancock Lumber. His name is Kevin, and his dad had passed away suddenly. And he was a young man, gets thrown into the CEO position, right? It was a family generational, right? 4, 5, 6 generations. And they're one of the oldest businesses in the United States, right? So can you imagine the stress first on this young person thrown into this position?
Yeah, don't screw it up, right?
Don't screw it up. Like, this is a legacy, right? Well, anyway, he develops what's called spasmodic, and I can't say the last word, but it's a spasmodic disorder with his voice. So it was painful, literally painful for him to speak. And it was like, so it's very disconnected. So he's been on my show several times. He's written several books, and now he's a thought leader across the United States, trying to help with when something like this happens. But how can you disperse the power? Exactly what you just said. So I give you credit for going to your team and saying, hey, what should we do next? You're the expert in your line of business. Well, he was forced, so he couldn't speak. His executives would come in, and quite large, and they'd say, we need to do blah, blah, right? New vendors or whatever. And all he could say is, what do you think? And they would come back, and he'd be like, that's a better idea than I had. And he'd say, run with it. Literally, these were the conversations. Well, fast forward in a decade it's been about 14 years, I think, since he's had this disorder. But in that first decade, after dispersing this power the way he did and letting his executives, who are the content expert, make the decisions, right? He has a 97% employee retention rate. And in that decade, Tim, wait for it, he made more profit, net profit, in 10 years than his whole previous ancestors made within the organization. It works, but we forget because we're resistant to our own change instead of embracing it and say, wait, I don't have to do this alone. Let me bring in my subject matter experts. This is the concept 80%. Let's drive it home, man. The last 20% is going to be better than what we can create alone, because we can't know everything about everything within our organization. It's crazy, right?
You're
Simple
so right.
And crazy. Yeah.
You are exactly right. And there's actually a 5th step to the 4-step process. And people get it at the end, but it's about how to accelerate progress. So now that you know how to change lanes and you can solve any problem or deal with any opportunity you've got out there, you know how to get from where you are to where you want to be. How do you and your team use that I advocate creating a tradition where, let's say, twice a year, you actually go looking for opportunities to solve additional problems or make forward progress. And in less than 2 years' time, you're typically a market leader or you're knocking on the door. And it's how to accelerate progress. I love that story because it's actually what happens when you and your team start looking for change, because you can, because no one changes lanes to do worse, right? You do, and then your business success accelerates.
I love it. I love it. It's just so great. Thank you so much. So a couple of things. If you have a question for Tim directly, you can email him. It's Tim at lanes plural approach.com, website changinglanesapproach.com. And you do have a free gift. Actually, are we going to do 2 gifts? Am I cool?
I'm gonna give you the link. I think I already have given you the link for this leadership guide to
resistance to change, right?
Yeah, reduce or eliminate resistance to change. And then I have a book coming out. This whole thing started with me writing a book, and it's going to be published in November. And so I'd be happy to send a review copy of that book. It's in formatting right now. I know you know what I'm talking about. So it's in formatting right now, and it should be ready in about 3 to 4 weeks. But anybody that drops me a line and says, "Hey, I'd love an copy of the ebook," I'll be happy to send you a review copy in advance.
That would be so cool. So again, the resistance to change guide, that's the 5-step approach, right, Tim? That is going to be in the show notes. If you'd like the book that's coming out in November and you want it immediately, like you're pedal to the metal, let's get this going, email Tim and he could send you that. It's not pretty, but you get the content's there. It's just the formatting. It's kind of in the final stages of publication.
I should have it back in 3 to 4 weeks where I can send it to people. But if they let me know now, I'll put them on the list and they'll be an early recipient.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate that, Tim. Thank you for your generosity.
My pleasure. This has been great. I love the theme of your podcast, and this conversation has been so enjoyable. Thank you so much for the invitation.
I'm telling you, I'm going to use this in my class. And
right.
I'm teaching it again in January now. I do it once a year, but this is going to be, I want to update the podcast, and I've been, this is going to be the one. It's chosen. Tim, you've been chosen.
All right.
Everybody listening, they
heard
tell my
wife. All right.
Tell her that. Say, Connie chose me. I don't know what that means, right? Thank you. Thank you.
All
thank
right.
you for
My
a
pleasure.
fun show and just so much great information. Really appreciate it. Again, connect with Tim, either Tim at changinglanesapproach.com or go to the website changinglanesapproach.com. And again, the free gift, the resistance to change guide will be in the show notes. Go ahead.
Right. And I know we mentioned too that there's a way on the website that people can contact me if they would like to have a conversation about any change that they're working on and how this might approach. I do strategy calls with anybody that wants to book a call. There's no charge, and we'll talk about how they can apply these 4 steps to their future.
Thank you so much, Tim. You're a love. You're my people. I tell you,
Right.
I'm here to support, and you know what? We make money on the back end. That's a beautiful thing, but it really starts with the support and helping others. The ship really, the tide really does rise all ships together.
You're doing great things. Thank you, Connie.
Same to you, Tim. Thanks so much.
Take
And
care.
I hope you will join me weekly as we question, build, and discover together, no matter where you are on changing in your life, career, business, whatever it might be. I truly hope my guests and I provide actionable steps that you can take. Listening to the show, hearing the information, reading the free gift that Tim has provided, but doing nothing with the information. It's just information in your brain. Trust me, if you start to implement one little baby step at a time, one little step in that freehand guide that Tim is sharing with us, I promise you magic will happen on the back end. I call it the magic wand. Tim called it the magic wand. We are in Simpatico today, but really, really take that information, use it, implement it, and I promise you great things happen. Thank you again, Tim. Thank you for joining me and listening to Enlightenment of Change on webtalkradio.com. I'm your host, Connie Whitman. I truly look forward to seeing you next week. And you know I am honored to have you on this journey of change with me. And again, I hope that my guests and I provide just a little bit more ease and grace in your life, because life is hard enough. Let's make it a little bit easier, and we can do that together. I love you all. I will see you next week. Have a great one. Be inspired and change one little thing. Magic happens. I love you. Have a great week.